Hello, and you're listening to Eco Justice Radio. We present environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. Eco Justice Radio acknowledges we record the show on the traditional territory of the Tongva and all of their relatives. Welcome, I am Jack Ide. On today's show, Dream of a New World, Art's Role in Societal Change. I will be interviewing Shana Dambrot, Los Angeles-based art critic, author, and curator. Shana Dambrot has been arts editor for the LA Weekly and a contributor to the Village Voice, Flaunt, Artillery, and other culture publications. She studied art history at Vassar College and is the recipient of the 2022 and 2024 Mosaic Future Art Writers Prize, the 2022 Rabkin Prize for Art Criticism, and the LA Press Club National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Critic of the Year Award for 2022. Her surrealist novel, Zen Psychosis, published by Griffith Moon, was released in 2020. Can we trace where Western civilization went wrong in the 1400s when Filippo Brunelleschi, known for his brazen duomo designs in Florence, Italy, invented the linear perspective that dominated art, architecture, and city planning ever since? This almost photographic perspective of the world around us translated to cities and their people being separated from nature, and of course the ecosystems that nourish us all. Some European painters in the early 20th century, like Picasso and Matisse, challenged this linear perspective and were called Fauves, or wild beasts. But do we need more wild beasts rather than just bad boy white dudes to overcome these linear perspective machines and heal our relationship with the earth? On today's show, Shana Dambrot, art history and culture writer from the Los Angeles' vibrant art scene, guides us on a romp through these European art movements to trace how we got here and where we're headed. We delve into the question of how environmental and climate activism intertwine with artistic expression. Shana engages in a thought-provoking conversation about the role of art in shaping a better world, exploring the dreams and tangible enactments of new realities. Join us as we confront the big question: whose dream? Whose world? What does better truly mean? This episode is not just an exploration of art, but a challenge to the status quo and an invitation to envision a future that includes everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Eco Justice Radio and our show, Dream of a New World, Art's Role in Societal Change. I'm your host, Jack Ide, and it is my honor to welcome our guest, Shana Dambrot, Los Angeles-based art critic, author, and curator. Welcome to Eco Justice Radio. Shana, you've been doing incredible work decoding the many manifestations of the Los Angeles art scene for the masses in your writing. I'm excited to survey where environmental and climate activism collide with the art world. I saw a quote from Martha Gonzalez from the band Quetzal, who's also a professor at Scripps Claremont College, talking about how art practices can be used to go beyond resistance into actively building on the dream, tangible enactments of new worlds. Okay, we're going to go drill down on how you see this concept of the dream, and that's in quotes, and the new and better world that we should be moving toward. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I love starting with the easy questions. I think that's awesome.
I think they're all easy questions. There's nothing difficult.
Well, you know, it's so funny. I remember vividly being an undergraduate, and we were doing a unit on, you know, sort of like the literary and philosophical texts that accompanied the art history core program. And we got to Derrida, and our professor was like, listen, I know I'm gonna lose two of you on the Derrida module.
Only two?
I always lose at least two of you, but my hope is, and I thought, what are you talking about? And I was very nearly one of them. I pulled out just in time. But the thing is, what stuck with me about that kind of framework, not all through my life since then, but in the context of the last several years, is that actually, even if you think of deconstructivism as an obscure literary or, pedagogical sort of approach or premise, the idea of questioning everything, including the default language that you're using to describe a situation, has actually kind of never been more important to practice. And so when you ask me about the dream of a better world, the first thing I want to know is whose dream, whose world, and what do you mean by better?
Okay.
Right? And I'm not doing that to be...
Suddenly there's no answer.
But or there are a plurality of answers.
Of course, absolutely.
Do we have to choose between them? Can several coexist? But I think this idea, the most important for this incredible radio show, which, by the way, thank you for having me. I'm super honored. I mean, your show is amazing. And I think that the expansive way that you try to bring different people from different kind of thought universes into the conversation is exactly what's needed. So I'm genuinely excited to be having this conversation with you today. But I think the idea of better is the most important thing, the most important thread to pull on. Because you ask somebody better and they'll say clean and safe. And a lot of times clean and safe is code for put all the troubles out of sight. Let the favela happen over there with all of the poverty and disease and racism, so that the downtown city where all the fancy people live can be clean and safe and you can point to your better world, is often how that actually manifests, right? People don't have a tendency to solve problems. They want to make the problems go away. And that isn't actually better, or to say better for whom. It's like when people say, oh, the good old days. And it's like, excuse me, sir. But women and people of color and literally everyone else would like a word about how good those good old days were.
So you don't want to make America great again?
I guess... I don't know. Okay, no, not really. I don't. And I do want to make America great, but I want to make America more like the idea that it was when it was an idea, because that was a really good idea when we had it. But there were problems from the beginning. For example, all the people already living here. For to just name one thing.
Yeah, that's more than one thing. That's a whole long list of things. Yeah, it's a
whole thing. And the fact that we were fighting a proxy war between the French and English that was sold to us as a struggle for our own liberation, and the betrayal of the indigenous populations and the outside role that Christian zealots had in formulating the platform of early American culture. Like, a lot of that stuff is not how it's taught. And part of the original idea of America that I'm talking about is this idea that there's room for every kind of thought. And so I accept the paradox that I'm allowed to say the things I just said and still be kind of a fan of a lot of what America has accomplished for the good. Maybe not as much, recently.
Yeah. Well, so the question of how the art is tied into this, and I think you were hinting at a lot of things there, that maybe we should go back to where this dream went awry.
Well, I think the dream went awry as soon as more people wanted a part of it. Right? Like, I think the dream was like the initial dream was for sort of like white men. They came here, right? As they were going to, I don't even know what was on their mind, but they came here and they saw this opportunity and they wanted their version of freedom from like an oppressive and completely insane monarch. And all of that stuff was super legit. Like, they fought and died for their own freedom. It's just that as soon as it started to wanting to be extended to, say, the Native Americans that they had killed accidentally and intentionally and definitely displaced, or, women of any kind, and then later Black people, as soon as those folks were like, oh yeah, no, the dream, that sounds amazing, I want some of that, then all of a sudden barriers started getting erected.
Right.
And games started getting rigged, and corporations got to be people, like in the 1800s already. It was supposed to be, the idea of the corporation was supposed to be temporary for the purpose of building your building, and then it dissolves. Then they quietly stopped dissolving it. And now the money makers are in charge, and the dream suddenly gets moved further and further away from everyone else except that same core of European white capitalists, right? And with the apologies for the drastic oversimplification, that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
And so I think there was an inflection point when they could have stayed true to the principle of, yeah, everybody, if you made it here, you're here, let's go, let's do this, we're all together. You've made it to America just like I did, now we're Americans together. That could have really been something, you know? It really could have been something. And, you know, regressive, selfish forces were there from the beginning, and kind of it didn't really go that way.
Yeah. On the issue of art and design, some of us point to the invention of Western linear perspective. This is long before any of these gringuitos arrived in lovely Norte America, which wasn't what it was called in the back days.
No, it certainly wasn't.
The illusion of death on a flat surface, this perspective concept. We can blame Italian Renaissance architect Filippo Brunelleschi. At least he's blamed. That would be in the 1400s.
I hate that guy.
Interesting. Well, because these perspective machines, like they flattened everything out. They made it easy to figure out. It set up really. We interviewed Carl Welty, who's an architect, but he's also a big thinker on these issues. Where design was. This is where we didn't care if there was a river, what the wind was blowing, how the sun was coming. It was these beautiful geometric designs placed over the earth, and you know that's the cities of course Firenze and Paris were laid out with these
Moses in New York,
these wonderful and of course art was part of that, and you look at Renaissance art and it's just this stuff. What do you think of all that?
Well, I definitely think that part of one aspect of that was not only the sort of Apollonian, you know, rectilinearity, power structure, although that's certainly part of it. I think imposition is kind of the word. Like, it's this dominant thing where it's like, we are going to tame and dominate, you know, nature, and we're going to make nature do what we want it to do, and we're going to, you know, that strict geometry that really spoke to kind of like a kind of forcefulness, like an imposition is the word, of our will on the environment. Like, whatever's here is here, but what we need is for this to be here, so figure it out. But that was not sold as destructive. That was sold as marvels of engineering and modernity, right? And then you got steel and concrete and big, you know, large glass, and you started to see more and more of that. And then that became kind of like associated with the seats of power, which by now were starting to become like banks and not churches and things like that. And not that I'm so excited about the church being in charge of things, but I will say, when they were in charge, that architecture was the architecture of inspiration. That was feel lofty, come in, view this light, view this color, view this, all this life, these incredible paintings, these incredible stained glass, the incredible masonry work. And you were intended to walk into those places, and it was this interesting dynamic where like the mass would be in Latin, so even if you could read, you definitely couldn't read Latin. So there was no version of you understanding the words, so they put all the stories in the stained glass and the paintings. So even though there was an exclusivity in terms of who's allowed to actually talk to God, there was an attempt to make the message understandable and to use art and architecture to do that. And those buildings are gorgeous. And then I think by the time you get to and then so of course paintings of them, and you know, that sort of 3-point perspective and the dimensionality that is often taught in art history as part of the move out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. So it's often grafted onto this concept of like enlightenment and education, you know, and like almost science. And so it's taught as an advance.
Yes.
It's not taught as problematic in any way.
Until
it's like
today.
We finally became modern humans, look, and that's like you celebrate it. So Now and then of course the skyscraper and the phallic problem with contemporary architecture, then the sameness problem, then the myth of the male genius problem, and then finally we're now starting to see people, prizing other ways of creating public and private space.
We want to get into that.
Yeah, so I don't know if I would lay all the blame on that one guy.
No,
but I will say this: I read the book My Name Is Red by Orhan Pamuk with great interest. It's a marvelous book. It has multiple voices. It takes place in the court the world of the palace intrigue, very extremely fraught world of court painters in Istanbul at the dawn of this time that we're talking about. And one of the things that the book goes into in great detail is the struggle between realism and personal style and things like that. And in that context, trying to make something look as realistic as possible, which was so often a function of the three-point perspective that was kind of new, and they called it Frankish, because it's coming anyway. That you were saying that you as an artist could create an image that was as good as what God created out there, because you could do it with the same qualities, right? And it was seen as a kind of usurpation of a more divine authorship. And so what instead was prized in that aesthetic ecosystem was adherence to classical technique, that you could get better at doing something that was already the paradigm, that shoving your personal flourish into it was selfish and bizarre, and that you actually could honor the tradition that you came up from within by keeping it at its finest without trying to put all this other kind of foreign modernity ego into it. I don't know, I'm not an expert on that period, but this is, it's a beautiful book. And one of the first times that I remember seeing written down in a coherent form an argument against the European Renaissance is automatically better.
Nice.
And that's why it made a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
So,
an interesting contrast with Western linear perspective is Chinese nature landscape paintings.
Same thing.
And these depictions of mountains and rivers take on mythical symbolism. They're also created from multiple perspectives rather than just this one perspective.
Right.
So, which means, it's a much more accurate perspective, and it considers the viewer, at least I'm asserting, as being part of this scene. But it's also, the symbolism goes well beyond that scene and says. So, what's your take on?
Well, I think part of it is for example, if you look at sort of ink wash painting, right? The kind of with the sumi ink and it's a very difficult to control medium. It's akin to watercolor. It kind of does what it wants. And yet there was this ability to kind of master it or just, be extremely good at it. But no matter how good at it you got, part of being a great master of it was internalizing this idea that the medium was also going to do a little bit of what the medium wanted to do, no matter how skilled you were. And that was kind of part of the love affair with it. And so there's this evocation, you're talking about the kind of organic, the rivers flowing, the mist is circling the top of the mountain, but it's very, very craggly upper peaks are poking out. And is that a waterfall? Is that a river or an illusion? And I haven't been through mainland China, but I've seen enough to know that even the most fantastical sort of mountain drawings, that's actually what the landscape looks like there. And these sort of verticalities and trees in amazing places, and that there is a sense of magic in the landscape itself that I think is important to those artists to capture, more so than a quote-unquote realistic depiction of the scene of what that mountain extremely actually looks like, that's only part of it.
Right.
And I think that's something that definitely belongs in this conversation, because is the goal to just go out there and make the best picture, and what does that mean? The one that's most faithfully a rendering. Why is that the best? Who said that was the best? What if the best was something more dissolute and emotional, and with all this room for viewers to see themselves in the picture? And you know what I mean? Like, what if that was the best? And that's all beyond taste. You know what I mean? That's like what the artist is going for, because no artist says I want to make a bad picture. So what does the artist mean?
Well, we have to go to break in just a little bit, but so the question is, I've heard people assert that this is indicative that Chinese people are more living with nature. It's a symbolism of that. I don't know if we can make that jump.
I would not dare to even have it. I would never.
It's certainly not today's Chinese
I will tell you
people.
this: aren't there giant TV screens with pictures of the sun on it in Beijing because of the smog? So yeah, I don't know.
That's today, though. We're talking ancient. This is thousands and thousands of years.
You know what? I would
history.
not presume to put that on them. I fear that there's a kind of ethnographic othering from my position as like a latter-day New Yorker to even think something like that.
Thank you for
that. But I will say that there is no doubt that that's part of the mythology with which Westerners regard the Orient, and it always has been. And I don't want to be the person who tries to answer how accurate that is, but I think it's an amazing question to ask.
Good.
As the world shrinks, especially.
Yeah. Well, we have to go to break. We'll be back to talk more about art and the world and the vision for a better future, whatever that means. So we'll be back in a sec. Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today you're listening to Dream of a New World, Art's Role in Societal Change. I'm your host, Jack Ite, and our guest is Shana Dambrot, Los Angeles-based art critic, author, and curator. Jacques Derrida, who was mentioned in the last segment, was a French philosopher who referred to himself as a historian. He questioned assumptions of the Western philosophical tradition and also more broadly Western culture. Derrida called his challenge to the assumptions of Western culture deconstruction. On some occasions, Derrida referred to deconstruction as a radicalization of a certain spirit of Marxism. Here's a quote from Jacques Derrida. "There is a future which is predictable, programmed, scheduled, foreseeable, but there is a future, l'avenir, to come, which refers to someone who comes, whose arrival is totally unexpected. For me, that is the real future, that which is totally unpredictable. The other, who comes without my being able to anticipate their arrival. So if there is a real future beyond the other known future, it is l'avenir, in that it is the coming of the other when I am completely unable to foresee their arrival." Jacques Derrida. We are back, and just so you know, there's a lot of background noise here, unlike our normal studio. Shana and I are out at Exposition Park in Los Angeles, adjacent to the Rose Garden. So what was the reasoning for us meeting this auspicious spot in the center of Los Angeles?
Well, I think that what happened was you were like, we should go do this somewhere. Like, let's pick a where to go. And I immediately, I think I mentioned maybe the Huntington.
Yeah.
And of course, the Huntington is incredible.
The Huntington Museum,
the
which is in
Huntington
San Marino.
Botanical
Gardens. Huntington
Library
Gardens.
And Art Center.
There you go.
Exactly. And it's a real treasure of the Los Angeles cultural landscape. It's in like the fanciest part of town that you can think of, and it costs $1 million to go there, but it's super nice. And that's kind of what happened. So I was like, actually, you know what? The Rose Garden at USC is also incredibly beautiful. Like, it's a postage stamp size compared to the Huntington, but it's beautiful. And as if on cue, hear that? That would be the metro, the train.
Meaning?
We are at a metro station, so it's free, it's gorgeous, and you can literally step off of public transportation right into it. And I thought that those things were rare enough in combination and also kind of on brand for your show. So that's how we got here.
Yes, accessible to all. And this is art and beauty.
It is.
It's interesting, all this talk about perspective and, where we went awry. So, to get back into a little bit of that, a period where Europeans started to abandon the linear perspective.
Yeah.
And connect with the rhythms of nature, at least in theory.
Uh-huh.
Well, there was Gauguin and there was Van Gogh.
Yeah.
And there's the Fauvists, the wild beasts of the early 20th century France. And, there was Matisse.
Did you say France?
I said France. I hope that's okay. There was Matisse, Derain, and even Pablo Picasso.
Ugh.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Fauves and their impact on the dream of the wild? Because, there's many different ways of looking at it.
So I hope Derrida didn't go too far. We need him back for a second.
Let it flow.
I would say, look, it's the Fauves, they have such a completely manic, absolutely ridiculous relationship to color that there's no way everyone's going to love it, because so much of it is just absolutely crazy looking.
Yeah.
Crazy looking. And it has this frenetic energy because they're trying to sort of be in the flow state or whatever. They didn't call it that then. I applaud their efforts to, if not thwart, at least sidestep or delay their succumbing to the sort of hard edge modern world that was headed their way.
Yeah.
And I get it. I think that they must have felt a certain kind of way that would be analogous to how people who think the future is going to be AI running coal mines or something. Do you know what I mean? You don't know, because there's all this technology and there's all this money and the world is shrinking and everything is upside down from what you knew. I think that we're living through a version of that at the dawn of the 20th century.
Well, which is kind of why I throw it up here.
Exactly. So well spotted. And so I think that they would have, I absolutely think that we would all have access to that desire. It's the reason we all go forest bathing, or we all understand.
I don't know if we all go forest bathing.
Many. Most people just call it going for a walk in the woods.
Thank you for defining forest bathing.
I'm just saying, culturally, there's this insane moment where we're sort of being repackaged nature, and we're being told, but it's not like people forgot. You know what I mean? There's always been people interested, and I think it set up a kind of nature versus industry battle royale that we're still fighting, and so that's super interesting. I think it really was definitional in the way that we think about nature and industry being in opposition. I think started, if not with the actual Fauvists, at least certainly in the water they were swimming in, that most of the people that had the good fortune and privilege to decide they were going to do this with their lives were rich white guys.
Yeah.
Or white guys who had rich white guy friends.
Right.
And so you had these dudes from this position of unimaginable privilege decide that they were going to throw off the burden of the modern whatever, and they were going to go live this pure lifestyle in the woods. So I think it's important to remember that this, while it was amazing at the time and did what they wanted. It was a scandal. They didn't name themselves the Fauves. A critic who hated their work named them that. They were like, this is like a wild animal did it. What the hell is that? And they said, thank you for noticing. We're going to call ourselves Wild Animal. And that's how they got the name the Fauves, basically.
Well, can you tell us about Matisse's Bonheur de Vivre, the, joy of life?
Oh, the joy of life. Well, it's a wonky looking woodland glade full of naked women. What else do you want to know about it?
Sounds good.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, but also wow. And so I think, that's the part where art history, and I went to Vassar, and they knew what they were doing, and it was a feminist, Vassar's a feminist plot, so it wasn't like we were taught, but that it just in the 90s like wasn't complete mainstream currency to make sure to include those kinds of notes on things. It was an inclusive and expansive program, but it was still at its core a linear history of styles, wherein when they said art history, the Western was silent, right? Assumed, inherent. And when you taught anything else, it got a qualifier. Oh, Eastern arts.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
African arts. Oh, right? And so that was still the environment. Even though I treasure that education, I'm still involved with the college. Like, it was such a, it couldn't have been better. I myself have done a lot of that subsequent kind of augmentation of
Absolutely.
and not only on my own, but thanks to incredible artists and colleagues and other writers, and just our culture moving forward in 3 decades, hopefully. Right? So I look back on some of that now, and I remember what I was taught, but I have no choice but to, contextualize it anew. And now I think that it was pressing back against certain soul-crushing aspects of like the capitalist enterprise to come.
Right.
But it certainly wasn't crushing the patriarchy.
No.
And it was a little bit exoticizing and othering towards, again, like America, the people that already lived out there. The people that lived in the great swaths of nature that we're worshiping. They're not empty, mate. There's a whole bunch of people living out there. But that European enterprise kind of regarded those humans as part of the landscape, right? It was like this idea of the noble savage, where they would, be very patronizing, and they'd go, oh, they're living in the woods like the animals, but their hearts are pure, and we want to be like that. And it's like, let me stop you right there. Because there's like whole entire incredibly advanced civilizations and stuff, and I need you to, and so watching that unfold in the books of, in the pages of art history is like kind of watching a horror movie where you're screaming like, don't go in the cellar. It's like, what's coming, and you hear the language, and it sounds so uplifting and so forward thinking, and the new world's coming, and generally speaking, as the heirs of Western European society, did not realize until much, much later, aka basically right now, at whose expense a lot of that came. And so it's hard for me to just go, the Fauves, I want to frolic in the trees. Like, I want that for you.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to deracinate that from what we know, what we all really know now.
Well, what we're trying to do in this effort in our discussion is to go from a period of how to break through of this Western linear perspective.
Yeah.
And we're covering a couple different efforts that were early efforts to try and do that.
Well, I like your kind of maybe unintentional, maybe totally intentional, the kind of double meaning of the word perspective in this context is really appealing to me. You knew that. You knew
so
that.
Surrealism?
Of course you did.
So surrealism.
Surrealism, yeah.
I'll let you. I have explanations. You're.
No, what you wrote was really good.
Well.
Okay, so here's the thing I'll say about surrealism. People don't always completely remember, but I kind of think it's the most important part, that you can't have surrealism without realism.
Right.
So that, to my mind, the whole surrealist enterprise came up, and not coincidentally, but like direct causality, one-to-one, same people in the same room, with the rise of the practice of psychoanalysis in Europe. And so, Freud and all the, and Rank and Adler and all these inquisitions into the nature of the subconscious, right? And then all those artists, of course, how are you an artist? And this science is coming forward, and you're like, wait a minute, there's an entire realm of consciousness we haven't directly interacted with. Of course you can see why there would be a rush of visual artists and musicians and every kind of creative thinker to that new field. So many artists had many different, and poets had many different ways of trying to tease that out. And was it like, I'm going to be in a dream state and create, or was it like, I'm going to be just sober as a judge, but try to replicate, or, every artist has a different way of doing things. But what was interesting was that part and parcel of the psychoanalytical enterprise is this idea that there is a language, a lexicon of symbols that actually have, this idea of the archetype. And I hesitate to use the word universal because cultural context makes a difference in the meaning of symbols. But that at least there's a place you can get to where you can kind of chart a recurrence and start a conversation. And that's how it was able to kind of, become a science, psychoanalysis. And so we're dealing with a language of symbolism. So of course, all the artists are going to be part of that. I think that what's interesting is that it was yet another really good example of trying to subvert this kind of, I said Apollonian earlier, but that's kind of what it is, right? It's a more Dionysian way of approaching living and self-knowledge, to listen to messages from the subconscious rather than just always trying to put everything in the reason.
Dionysus, that's like the goddess of love.
So Apollo was like math, sun, golden boy, chariots in the sky, and Dionysus was more like Bacchus. Right.
Love,
The
drink,
grotto,
party,
the wine, the groping. Yeah. But most human beings are caught in most human beings are somewhere on that continuum. We have both impulses.
Absolutely.
We need both. But you can look at cultural undertakings and think like, okay, the Haussmannization of Paris was, definitely like Apollonian in that model versus, say, the Fauves would be Dionysian, and neither one of them is perfect. But you do kind of need both if you're going to get anywhere, really.
Well, so there's works of painting, writing, theater, filmmaking, photography, and it keeps going on. Of course, in this tradition, we have this lovely novel you wrote called Zen Psychosis. It's described as a dream journal, which becomes a memoir, a way to examine the power of dreams to describe a narrative and character arc within a storyline.
Yes.
The lovely thing about this work for me is it's like an Alzheimerian. I'm going to coin this word.
That's a great word. I like that
because it's like it's not building a narrative. It's a scene that happens and then it's almost forgotten this is my perspective of it. You wrote it, so you might have a different thing. I think it builds on these previous dreams for the reader, but in the narrative, it starts a new dream in the next chapter, and it is it very feels like dream state, but it's not like the boring dreams who you don't want someone to tell you, because this goes directly back, thank you by the way, but this goes directly back to the surrealism conversation, because I feel like how dreams work and how surrealism works at its best is not that it looks crazy or looks completely strange necessarily. It's more like that it's familiar and recognizable, but the behaviors of the people or objects or whatever are what's strange. So it's like you're sitting there and you look like you, and I know where we are, but then unbelievable things start to happen from there. Right. Or even in Dali or some of them, it's the melting clock. Let's take that. It works because it looks like a clock, right? So it looks like a normal office clock, and now it's melting, and that's weird. You see what I mean? Right.
But if it was like a super insane looking clock that had, arms and legs and told the time backwards, and then it melted, you'd be like, you know what I mean? It was like, so that's it. The sweet spot for me on surrealism and on this book is that place where it seems familiar and then takes you somewhere else unexpectedly. And that place, oh, kitty, is, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, kitty. I wasn't expecting a cat to come to our podcast today. But just to say, so that, I feel like, is meaningful surrealism is more than just an onslaught of strangeness.
Thank you, actually. And this talk about place, what I like about how you handled it the place kept changing. There's some New Jersey, there's Los Angeles, there's a lot of different locales, some that are not even, some are blended together. But it's also kind of how we experience place, because we are moving around a lot as a people. We hop on planes and suddenly we're
I saw
dropped
somebody
in.
yesterday that I flew in from New York this morning, and I'm on my way to not even back to New York tonight, and that's
honestly,
how we live
it feels
now.
surreal when you you go to New York City and you're like, what am I doing in New York City? It takes about a week to go, oh, I'm in New York City, and then you're like getting back on the plane. And so it's an interesting evocation of that. We do have to take a break. Another
can
break.
I go play with the cat?
Yeah, you can. And we're gonna get into more art, not just the history, although it's fun to talk about the history. So we'll be back. Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today you're listening to Dream of a New World, Art's Role in Societal Change. I'm your host, Jack Ite, and our guest is Shana Dambrot, Los Angeles-based art critic, author, and curator. Well, we're back with Shana Dambrot.
Welcome back, everybody.
Here we are at the Exposition Park. And so, I submit we've seen a strong resurgence of art, literature, music, bent on overcoming this depiction of humans as separate from nature.
Yes, agree.
So,
Celebrate.
creativity employing this artistic abstraction in traditional mythologies, post-dystopic literature, the concept of an indigenous shamanism that is invading our urban culture, for better or worse sometimes, depending, along with mystical and non-mystical psychedelic use, ambient noise music, and the trend towards ecological urbanism are integrally entwined. Do you agree that there's a movement, as you just said you agreed, going on and under the radar from the mainstream, or maybe it's out in the mainstream? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting combination. And
that's my combination.
Yeah, and I don't even mean that as
credit.
A dodge, but like the idea that, some people obviously are just sort of like doing it and they're taking it really seriously. And some people are like random trust fund kids, like if their name, if their parents name them Butterfly, I'll eat my shoe, you know what I mean? So I feel like somewhere, again, most people are kind of in the middle. We want to do better. We don't really know how. Our government is failing us. Our media is failing us. But our artists and poets, and in some cases, filmmakers, dancers, right? Musicians, certainly. These people are doing their best not to fail us. There are people in those realms trying to inspire and evoke and introduce science and difficult conversations into the proceedings. I think that one of the chief functions of art and poetry is to create a space that is safe and beautiful enough that it's okay to talk about terrifying things in it. And I think that's kind of the answer. The people working at that intersection, which, by the way, increasingly includes a huge amount of absolutely gifted Native American and Indigenous artists in this country, finally getting the recognition that they deserve. And I think that that is so much better than what was going on before, which was straight appropriation. Yeah. I think that is most of where this has been for the last generation or two. But I think that I really do see a lot of evidence that that is shifting, and that the people who've been attempted to be completely erased, then completely oppressed, then appropriated from, are now finally at the table. And we're seeing the results. We're seeing everything from Deb Haaland to Jeffrey Gibson representing America in the Venice Biennale this year. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing artists like Sarah Rosalina and Wendy Red Star and Raven Chacon winning a MacArthur grant this year. Yeah. And, you really, and the most recent edition of the Made in LA Biennale at the Hammer Museum, as I wrote in my review, I didn't set out to write about the indigenous artists in the show. I wanted to write about the best work in the show and the work that got the memo about, so to speak, about, hey, this isn't a gallery, this is a biennale. Let's, like, if we're going to do it, let's do it. To be not necessarily splashy or theatrical for its own sake, but to be grabby and kind of operatic. It's a biennial. Like, let's go, right? This is an opportunity. You want to do something, you know, small and meditative or whatever, like, do that. That's, you know, a gallery setting. And so when I walked into the show, I just coincidentally ended up with a list of things that I found most memorable being from that community. And I just thought, oh, well, would you look at that? That's amazing. Like, and so it was incredibly legit, but very satisfying when I realized it, because I felt so good about being able to genuinely say, yeah, I get, this is all the work I love the most. And they went for it. And I was so proud of the Hammer for platforming that level of support. And I really hope it's not a one-off. I hope that these incredible voices are in it now. Like, I want them in this conversation going forward. I don't just want it to be that one time the biennial was awesome.
Right.
So I think that we really might well and truly have finally arrived at a place where we're going to let these people speak for themselves. Finally. Yeah. However many centuries into it. And I hope that I'm right.
Yeah, well, a couple artists who I've seen, Marvin Swallow, who does these incredible paintings. He's a Sundance and ceremonial chief in Lakota tradition. He's a roadman of the Native American Church. He's a crazy guy. I know him personally.
Superman is awesome. Do you know Superman?
No.
He's a fancy dancer, but like a champion level.
Oh, wow.
And he has gone out on this sort of like education tour of, you know, kind of spreading the word of what the culture is. And he's like young and hip and, you know, good looking and, you know, photogenic and great with crowds. And he's just been out there. He's a star.
What about John Quick to See Smith? I don't know if I pronounced her name. Do you know about her?
I don't know.
I was reading, she's a Salish artist who makes parallels from the old world to contemporary art. Her Hunkpapa drum becomes a Martha Rothko painting. Ledger book symbols become Cy Twombly's. Noxby bag is a Paul Klee. A Blackfoot robe is an Agnes Martin.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much of that. And, you know, I mentioned Deb Haaland before, and of course she's, you know, Secretary of the Interior, not an artist, but at the same time, this dynamic within the art and literature world, and film and television, by the way, as well, is coinciding with an unprecedented period of land stewardship return as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's not an accident that all of that is happening at the same time. Even though I'm not an expert in interior in interior department policy, it does seem to me that they share the headlines. And
being involved with the Bush Biden administration, which is
leave that out.
Not that
you're worried about me swearing.
They're not that far from Bush and Biden. They're all kind of the same. So she's had to reduce her reality significantly. But being there, and there's still more to come.
It's the first of what I hope is a million steps.
Absolutely.
But at least it's been taken, and that's kind of how I feel about, you know. But I'm a fan. I'm a personal fan of Jeffrey Gibson's art. I've written about it before, and I don't know what he's going to do at the Venice Biennale. I'm going to see, but whatever it is going to be amazing because he's a gifted artist.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's who's representing us on the world stage.
That's great.
Finally. And I'm genuinely happy for, like, America at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
another one that I love is the Art of Urban Decay in Detroit. The Heidelberg Project.
The Heidelberg Project.
It's an urban conceptual art installation by Thierry Guiton in the formerly Central Core that has been hollowed out by, you know, the insane difficulties that Detroit has had with industrial capitalism in the last 40, 50, 60 years. It was devastated in a 1967 riots, and he turned it into a public art project. The public art project.
Residents have kept it going and expanded it and protected it.
Well, sometimes. Mostly. I mean, there's been a lot of there's been a lot of arson. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's still there, and it's still beautiful.
But it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. It's still beautiful, and it's very important. And it's such a...
It's like Christiania without the drugs. In that, I mean, because people think, they hear Christiania and they think, that's where an open air pop market in Copenhagen. Let me tell you something. That's about 5% of the footprint of Christiania. The rest of it is a self-built art community where the literal buildings are like made out of art, basically, and you have your freedoms within that. And it reminds me of that a little bit, where it's like, what is the opposite of a homeowners association?
I don't have that.
Yeah, you do. It's the Heidelberg Project.
Okay, good. Thank you. Next time you're in Detroit, listeners, check that out, without a doubt. So we're talking about some great things happening, but there's other things that I'm not sure. So there's the holy pilgrimage of Burning Man. Ugh. It's considered a vision of the future.
Is it? Is it really?
Considered. I didn't say it was by me. People, you know what? Maybe
who told you that?
When it started. I'm sure we have listeners who love Burning Man, and we understand it. So this is the question. So do-it-yourself creation, desert nomad simulacra, based on 10 principles of decommodification, radical self-expression, self-reliance, and inclusion is what I got this from somewhere. I didn't make it up. What do you think? Is it a corporate-funded juggernaut vacation spot for the foiled and drug-diluted, or is it something way more visionary? I think it's a blend, myself. I think
it's quite obviously both, right?
Yeah.
So it's both, and I've never been. And
so neither...
God is my witness,
right.
I will never go.
Yeah, I understand. And I do, because I haven't gone either. Listen, so we're not good. We're not good critics.
No. I mean, I get it. I just want to say I get it. This isn't like, don't email me. It's don't at me. I want you to be happy. I want all of you to be so happy. For me, I don't like dirt, heat, peeing outside. To me just a person, not me a culture critic, but just me, just like Shana from New York walking down the street, it seems like a circle of hell, like physically being there.
Yeah.
But that said, I've known many people that it means a great deal to. I even met the guy who literally founded it, the guy who literally built the first man on a beach in the Bay Area and set that on fire, and then that became Burning Man. Like, I know the people, okay?
Right.
And they're not 100% on board. Like, they're skeptical of its evolution. Because it's changed.
Yes.
And so everything changes, and that's fine. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm happy for them. If that's what they want for themselves, I will be the last person on earth to get in their way. But if you're telling me that I have to go live in a tent in the middle of a fly-infested dust bowl to achieve utopia, then I guess utopia is not for me.
Yeah.
Because I like cities. And what I'm desperate to find out is if there's a way where I'm allowed to continue to like being in the planet's great cities without betraying my hopes that we still get to have a planet.
Yeah.
Like, is there a way to live urban that's not part of the problem? And that's a question I have for you. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
So I do kind of understand,
yes.
But they're trying.
Right.
And you know what? I respect the symbolism.
Maybe we should move on from Burning Man. We got a lot of stuff. We got 4 minutes.
All right.
A lot of good stuff to talk about. We have a few things to talk about. We've got gentrification in art, vandalism of artworks. What?
Listen, it depends on what kind of show you want, but the answer to how I feel about those vandals, as you know, is I honestly hate those little and sometimes I relax when I'm trying to go to sleep at night by fantasizing about being there when one of them tries it so I can kick the shit out of them.
They've done 38 of them. They have no clue what they're doing.
They try to do that shit in front of me.
You know what? The first one, the second one, I understood.
Let me tell you something.
Maybe the third one.
If you glue your hands to the museum wall, expect a kick in the balls from me when you can't defend yourself.
You heard it here first. We'll leave it at that.
That's it. That's how I
Yeah,
feel.
because they burned themselves out. 38 of them. I'm a climate activist. You're not.
It's like
it's
humanity.
stupid.
You're going to save humanity.
Well,
it's
tomato soup.
But you're throwing
pumpkin
food
soup.
in a world where people are starving. You're throwing food at the objects that represent the best of humanity. So honestly, go do it at the Exxon headquarters like a normal person. What the hell? You're alienating natural allies. And I can't wait to have the opportunity to punch one. That's how I feel. You can put that in or not. I don't care. But now I've said it.
So, can you tell us about some of the artists you've been writing about and curating shows and how they fit into this concept of creating new worlds, new visions? I know we've already sort of not gone with that, but that's how I wrote the question.
Well, you can fix that in post, right? Like you can record a new
what
intro.
What should it say? What should it say?
Well, I think I really like that deconstructed like better world. Like what is even a better world? Like literally, what does a better world even mean? Much less how are we going to make one?
There you go.
You know, there's a lot of artists I could talk about. We have one in common, but I won't talk about Osceola. My partner,
who did the photography for your book,
yes,
which was...
My partner's Osceola Refetov, and he is a photographer and filmmaker who is actively engaged in figuring out how art can exist as both a inspiring and pleasurable object and an actual voice for change, call to action. That literally is what he wakes up and thinks about every single day. You and he are going to be working together, so I won't take up too much of my time on that, and he's very capable of speaking for himself, but reductively that's the enterprise over there.
Yeah.
And I would say that, but when you asked me this, it was like I could almost pick so many because to their credit, so many artists have either, if they always were engaged with this, they've continued and their time has come. If they're new to the game, they're figuring it out now, they're embracing change, they're welcome new friends, right? So, and this goes not only to the question of like what is in your work, but like how does your studio run? Is it a zero waste studio, or are you a person making art about saving the world that you then have to ship 100 pounds of glass to to Tierra del Fuego to have your show about saving the world? It's like, hey, so, or are you using black oil paint and turpentine to make your art about the world? Like, so there's a lot of different ways other than literally what your art looks like where you can be engaged in this conversation. However, two people that I know are both, and two of my favorite artists in the world, one of whom I know very well and one of whom I'm looking forward to meeting in the fall, having followed their career forever. So first is Olafur Eliasson. Oh,
actually, I was going to bring him up, so thank you.
He's my total jam. He's my, I guess, second favorite Dane since I previously mentioned Osceola's Danish. So he can't be my favorite, but he's right there. And Olafur Eliasson, Danish Icelandic artist for whom I have an absolute obsessional fanship. But he is a sculptor, architect, designer, action taker, other things. You might remember him from that time he put part of a glacier in front of the Tate Modern and just let it melt all summer.
Yeah.
But he also makes buildings.
What was the waterfall off? Was it the Brooklyn Bridge?
It was the waterfall in the Hudson River somewhere, and it was just recycled from the water. It didn't, I mean, from the river, but it really made you understand like this is water and this is what's going on down there, and but he also makes these sort of stained glass kind of pavilion architectures and objects, and he has the whole gamut. There's things you can hold in your hand, and there's 4-story buildings and everything in between. And basically his art is about capturing and reframing natural phenomenon like light and reflectivity. But at every step that goes into making these sort of lovely abstract objects, it's like, okay, this pigment that I dyed this glass with is made, because it's handmade glass. So particles that were collected from the sediment left behind by a specific receding glacier in Iceland are collected and turned into the glass and in the piece that's kind of about the northern lights. And, right? So that's that kind of continuum. And all of his work intersects with this in some way, even though you might just walk in and think it's like an amazing like magic lantern projection. But then doesn't take much to discover that it's physically made of and transported using the most ecologically conscious means possible.
Great. Yeah.
And, a real walking the talk kind of way. And the other is a similar human. Her name is Lita Albuquerque.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I just saw her. We talked yesterday. So she's but she's always on my mind anyway, because I just kind of want to be her when I grow up a little bit. And I mean, as a woman in land art, she also has kind of carried the banner for a version of this conversation about domination and the imposition of linear perspective onto the landscape as being a male way of approaching land art. It's like, I'm going to go out into the desert and carve like a giant hole, and then that's going to be this
James Turrell, are we talking
James
about?
Turrell, Robert Smith, and all of them. Whereas the way Lita does it, it's definitionally ephemeral, right? It's with colored sands, but it's all organic. So it's not like she's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's fine that it's out in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And she'll draw these, it's almost more like in a sand mandala way, although it doesn't look like that, but she'll sometimes it does, but they're not ornate. They're more like glyphic, it's a spiral or a line or a forking line or something. And there'll be these pigment expressions, these processions of human beings, movement arts within it, and an activation that's almost like a ley line, like a crop circle kind of energy. And then it fades away into the world. The wind takes care of it.
Right.
And it goes back to nature, and you don't leave a trace in that way. And this is very important to her, and she approaches this practice from a very intentionally articulated matriarchal posture. And so it really is like, what would this look like if a woman did it, is really a lot of where she's coming from. And so, because it's not that land art it's not that the bigness and ambition should be the province of men and that women should be small and quiet. It's that when women want to have bigness and ambition, they can still do it in a way that honors. That's where the switch happens.
Yeah.
It's not about the quietness or the scale. It's about the character of the execution. And that's where she comes in for me. Many other things I could say about Lita. The good news for Los Angeles is that both of these artists will be showing here in September. Olafur Eliasson's doing a commission project at MoCA. Woohoo. And Lita has a survey. I'm going to get this wrong because yesterday I said that it was Cal Poly Pomona and she said no, it was Caltech, or maybe I said it was Caltech and she said no, it's the other one. Anyway, an institution. But concurrently to that, there'll be an exhibition at her gallery, which is Michael Cohn on Highland. So,
great.
And those are both happening in September in LA. And I'm really in awe of how each of them pursues this conversation. So I would say those.
So, Shana, it has been an experience. We got some partiers behind us. We got the Bacchus Dionysian
we got the
entity.
Dionysian future utopia happening, like 4 tables over. The kids are all right, Jack.
Tell our listeners they are absolutely all right, and we have great hope for them, and that's what we're what we're talking about here. How can our listeners follow your work, which is incredible and prolific? You've got a novel out there. Mm-hmm. Tell us about.
Well, I would say I'm not the world's most heartfelt fan of social media.
Right.
However, Instagram at my name, which is Shananys, Shananys, which is my first name. Dambrot's my last name. A lot of people think it's Niece Dambrot is my last name, but it actually isn't. But I don't blame them. I totally get it, but it just happens to not be.
Yeah.
So Shananys everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Post, Spoutable, Blue Sky, most recently Substack. That is my same social media handle. That's what Pinterest, I think, is probably, and I think I was on Tumblr for a while. Yes. But I'm what I do is every time there's a new platform, I just go and park my handle just in case.
Yeah.
And then when it fails, I ignore it. But right? Anyway, so Shananys. Instagram is the thing that's updated most often.
Yes.
And believe it or not, I do read my DMs unless they're nasty grams, because I don't like giving out my personal email, and work emails are always changing and everything like that. So I often apologize to other grown adults and yet tell them to DM me on Instagram with my apologies. I know, I'm so sorry, but it actually is the best way to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your absolutely busy reality to speak with us. It's a privilege and an honor for you to share your time with us. Absolutely.
Thank you. So I know it's really been fun being here in the middle of changes, looking forward to the future. And I know that a lot of my beloved community is in the same place. And it's just really wonderful to know that there are people like you who are fighting the good fight, sort of through it all. So I'm really happy to be part of it. Thank you for having me. I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you to our guest, Shana Dambrot. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been Dream of a New World, Art's Role in Societal Change. For an extended version of this interview, become a member of our Patreon or visit our website at ecojusticeradio.org. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJusticeRadio, SoCal350, and Wilder Utopia. If you like what you heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe, share the episodes, and help us continue our efforts by joining our Patreon or making a tax-deductible donation to the show. A project of SoCal 350, the show can be found on KPFK, KPFT, all major podcast apps, and at ecojusticeradio.org. Executive producer and host, myself, Jack Eit, co-host Jessica Aldridge, co-host Carrie Kim, and engineer and original music by Blake Quake Beats. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.